Can you see my screen? Everybody can see my screen? I've shared.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Vijay, can you hear me?
I can.
Good. Thank you.
I think we should start in one more minute.
Yeah, I think another minute.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it'll be
absolutely.
unfair for people who want to do.
Absolutely.
Rahul, is there a public link of the broadcast?
No, I tried it. I mean, this is available on a premium version, not in this version, the basic version. So then I thought, okay, let it be. At least for the first time, we're just trying it this way.
You'll be, but you'll be
I,
recording
I have
the.
record. I have set it on recording. Obviously, once it is recorded, I'll try to publish it. I think we should start now. Hi, good morning, everybody, and good morning, and thanks for joining this live webinar session conducted by AOD Center for Incubation, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship. We talking about ACIIE. We are at Ambedkar University, Delhi, and we help students, entrepreneurs, translate their ideas into social ventures, social business ventures. So we have been doing this for a while now. It's been almost 3.5 years that we have been in operations, and since then we have created eight to almost 10 social ventures from the AOD community and obviously from outside. Considering the current situation, which because of the COVID-19 issue, we have been brainstorming that what could be the next thing for the society at large. So we thought obviously social entrepreneurship will play a very important role in creating a huge impact in the society, the kind of conditions which are arising. And that's where we thought a session would be very useful, so that people who are working in this space can share their ideas, share their views, share their insights, what they have gained while working on the ground, and see and help other aspiring entrepreneurs, students to maybe start thinking of taking social entrepreneurship as their career option. So, thanks everybody for joining this session. The topic of today's discussion is dawn of the social entrepreneurship in the world. This will be a one and a half hour session. First 10 minutes, obviously introduction, which is happening right now. Post that we'll have our whosoever is joining, I would request everybody to mute their
Speakers.
speakers. Mute all. Yeah. I would request everybody to mute their mics whenever they're joining. So this session will be of 1.5 hour. First 10 minutes introduction, and then we will have 50 minutes of kind of a panel discussion between two of our esteemed panelists over here, and then 30 minutes of question answers. So here's the rule: like once you join, you can set your mic on mute. That is one. Second, you can, for question answers, as the discussion goes on, whatever questions you have, you can write on the chat window, which is on the right side of the screen. If you're able to write, I will read it in the end once the discussion gets over, and I will have the panelists answer your questions. On top of it, once the once the Q&A session is on, you can also ask your questions by raising your hand, and I will let you unmute your mic and you can ask directly those questions to the panelist. Here, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our panelists today. First, this will continue. Yeah. We have Mr. Vijay Pratap Singh, who has been a mentor with us for a while now. I would like to, he can talk more about himself, but yes, I would like to introduce himself here. Vijay is a first generation technology entrepreneur and renowned rural markets, digital financial services, and agriculture sector expert working on the financial inclusion, supply chain, and market access issues of rural communities. In the last 20 years, Vijay's work has focused on rural India, enabling access to markets, agriculture value chain, financial and enterprise services for rural businesses. Vijay brings in a 20 years of experience in IT, innovation, deep understanding of rural markets. He is passionate about networking rural communities and forging partnerships to seek transfer of equity in favor of farmers. Currently, obviously, Vijay is the co-founder and director of Ek Gaon. He co-founded Ek Gaon 15 years back. He has built the company as a network integrator, providing real-time platform where service providers compete for underserved consumers markets. Ek Gaon platform ensures cost-effective service delivery by using mobile phone applications to transmit verified and secure transaction information. He was also included amongst the 50 social entrepreneurs in India in 2009 by the business magazine, The Business Outlook. He has been on the mentorship board of Tata Social Enterprise Challenge, and he has been mentoring a lot of startups at ACII as well. So we would like to invite Vijay for this session, and thanks Vijay for taking this time to share your ideas and thoughts with the participants over here. We on the other side we have Mr. Mohammad Shariq Faruqi. He would be anchoring this session along with Vijay. Shariq sir is currently working as the executive director of ACIIE, and he is also the professor of social entrepreneurship at AOD. Sir has been a product design graduate from NID Ahmedabad. In his previous tenures, Sir has been a faculty member at NIFT New Delhi and has served as the founding director of Craft Development Institute Srinagar, which was an autonomous body set up by government of Jammu and Kashmir. His areas of expertise include social entrepreneurship, design thinking, design management, and capacity development for the unorganized sector, especially related to handicrafts and other skill-based activities. And he has been pioneer in establishing, in conceptualizing this incubation center at AOD, and obviously related activities at the center. Most of the students here who are joining from AOD might know him. We have been conducting several workshops, several training programs, and obviously you got the chance to interact with Shariq sir. So, sir, thank you very much for taking your time and hosting this webinar. So I would like to request both of you to start your discussion and show your obviously throw some light around the topic given today.
So thank you, Rahul. I hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yeah.
Vijay, can you hear me? Hello, Vijay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Microphone was switched off. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we should keep our microphones and probably the videos also on. Yes, Rahul?
Yeah, so just requesting others, please keep your mics mute. Only Shariq sir and Vijay sir's mic will be unmuted right now for the next half an hour or so.
Okay, thank you very much, and yes, welcome everybody. Good morning, and I hope you're safe and all right. Vijay, thank you very much for sparing this time. We understand that you have been a great mentor. Your continuous kind of support and engagement with the activities of ACCI has been very, very fruitful, and we have great regard for the work that you've been doing so far. I think to take this conversation and initiate this conversation, however repetitive it may feel and sound, I think there is no getting away from the fact that we must sort of start discussing the current situation uh, of this pandemic that we are living with at the moment. And I think before we get into details and some more basic fundamental things about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, I think it would be good to sort of contextualize where we are today and internationally. If we see, what do you feel? What is your feeling how the civil community, the entrepreneurial world, what kind of real challenges do they really face at this point of time within the situation? And how are they responding? What is the milieu and the environment like? It would be nice if you have any insights on that, since you have been working, I think, quite intensively, especially during this time when the lockdown began. What we hear is that you've been also, I think, helping farmers and helping food stuff getting transported, and several challenges which are there. So, what is your feeling about it, and what kind of insights you've got?
Uh, Thanks for having me here in this talk, and it's a very relevant topic for today times because these are transformative times. These are not ordinary times that one can think of. Similar kind of, if you want to contextualize where we are today, a similar transformative event last time was the World War II in 1940s. And we are seeing a bigger shift, transformative shift that is happening across the world today. Uh, if we go back and try to understand the context, every disaster has always, of course, there's a disaster effect of the disaster, but there's also a social and economic effect of the disaster. Most people think that Corona post COVID-19 is a health disaster. It is not. It is not just a health disaster. Health disaster is just one and small part of it. If you just try to understand the dimension of this disaster, which is right now where of 4 billion people, which is 60 to 70% population of the world, is under lockdown and quarantine, it is an unprecedented scale. This kind of scale has never been seen before. This has also led to destruction of many economic activities on which most of the people across the world survive. And since we know for very clearly, we know that most of the people survive on wages as the economic activity and not able to earn those wages during this lockdown period has have a very big impact on them. And the resultant impact, if you want to see, just let me just come down to India. What you're seeing is that during the first lockdown, most people obeyed what the government said, that we will provide you food, we will provide you shelter, you don't need to go to, just stay where you are. And most people followed and abided by that. But then that 21 days lockdown extended into more, 15 days more, and then now we are into a fourth lockdown, which is now we are going into almost the third month of lockdown, which is an unprecedented scale ever. Economics activities have been completely collapsed. The only large scale economic activity that is happening is agriculture, which is what people don't understand, that agriculture is a large economic activity which was affected for a short time but is happening, which means the farmers are the only people who are working right now. If we look into your question, and that is very relevant for us to understand the topic of social entrepreneurship, which we are discussing today, is that who is responding in this disaster? What is the response mechanism that we are seeing on the ground? If you see the news reports, if you see that what is coming out, data, information that is coming out, every single survey that is done by different media groups are indicating that 80 to 90, 85% to 95% of relief material, which was supposed to go to the migrant workers or the poor people who don't have food in largely cities, is not provided by the government. So if government is not providing that, I think somebody has switched on the microphone. Please close down the microphone. Uh, so if the government is not providing this relief, then who is providing this relief? And there is a very interesting question which comes out, that there's a large civil society, ordinary people, housing complexes are coming out of the way to help millions of various. We are talking about a minimum of 20 million to 50 million migrant workers who are in need of food in different parts of the city, and are in desperation of hunger and no money left with them, trying to reach to their homes in villages. Please, to understand within the Indian context, this kind of scale of migration has never happened in India before. Last time it was seen during partition in 1947, when a smaller number of people migrated from both sides of the border between India and Pakistan, and now Bangladesh. But if you look into the scale of disaster, the number of people who are on road desperately working to reach their homes, it is unprecedented. And who's providing food for them is individuals. It is non-profit organizations and civil society actors who have taken it upon themselves to provide. But can that, the question, most important question probably is to understand whether they will be able to sustain it over a period of time, because every single expert is saying that this disaster is not a 2 3 month disaster. This is a 2 3 year disaster. It will continue to grow.
Yeah, Vijay, I think that's what we're seeing all around us, and this has been a very spontaneous human response as one would have expected. Uh, there are good people everywhere, and I think that's the majority. Uh, but I'm sort of trying to understand, what are you hinting at? Where are you going with this? I understand that yes, the scale of the disaster and the time which it will span out, I think, is something which we are just beginning to understand properly and very uncertain. Um, and we are seeing all these actions which are there in terms of relief actions and people coming into this support and something of these things. Now, in the context of what we are discussing today, which is entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship, what are you trying to say with this description of the current event? I'm trying to contextualize it. Can you please contextualize this for us?
Okay, I think it's a brilliant question, because we need to understand, contextualize the challenge that is going to. There's a short-term challenge which is happening right now, which is largely about transport and food, but there is a long-term challenge also. We are talking about 50% of the people in this country without jobs for coming several months and probably few years, which means no income. In this context, let me point out that if you National Sample Survey of Government of India says that average income of a rural household, farming rural household, agriculture forms only 20%, 19 point some percent of the component of that income, which means 80% of the income of the rural household of farmers actually come from labor. The labor, which is wage, which is work in factories and various production centers and buildings and roads and everything. Now that is gone. That is completely gone. And the expectation, every single expectation is that the recovery rate of that would be very slow until unless massive investments are done on that, and there is the expectation that will invite workers back into that. So earning potential of people is coming down. So when a population as large as India, and we are talking about what is the challenge when the earning goes down of a family? Obviously, people fall back on their savings, which we have already seen. We have already seen the banking transaction data that is coming out right now. If it is an indication, it is showing that people have desperately started withdrawing money from their cash reserves that they are, either it is a fixed deposits or it is bank savings account or whatever. They're desperately withdrawing money from there, which means they're withdrawing money from future expenses and education of their children. They are withdrawing money from the future expenses that they have kept for emergencies like health. Every single privilege that people would have is going to go down. So let's paint a scenario. Let's paint a scenario where we are going, what we are looking at. We are looking at people with low income, people trying to save money by removing their children from the education system, because the education system in the current form will become unaffordable. People, we have seen that many of our middle class children have gone to digital systems. Uh, how much is the digital outreach of the education system today? Less than 6 to 7% is what we have, which means 94% people in this country do not have digital outreach, which is both a challenge as well as an opportunity also. Opportunity for people whom we call social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs to look at creating platform to actually reach out to these people who have to learn to maintain distancing, to learn, to educate themselves in their education or skilling. We are talking about a different paradigm altogether. We're talking about a paradigm where people with low income, so low income or low cost models of service delivery needs to be imagined, needs to be thought about, needs to be created. Food security, another big area, needs to be thought about. We are talking about just food security. Don't forget that India is, as of now, home to largest number of people with malnutrition. We have over 200 million people with malnutrition. We're not even talking about nutrition. Nutrition comes next. Is that how do we, in a time when people are cutting costs at all levels, nutrition specifically for children and women will be assured there? What are the mechanisms for that? What is that people will look at? One of the biggest, in such situations, one of the evils of the society emerge, social problems there. Uh, uh, we have drinking is a huge challenge in all households across the country, and India is the second largest consumer of alcohol in the world. I don't think many people even know that. And we saw when the alcohol shops were open for a very brief for some time, we saw the amount of rush that was there, which is clear indication of the kind of population. And when this population who doesn't get what they want has their families are obviously affected by their behavior, by their actions, which essentially means that you're talking about huge mental health challenges across the country. These mental health challenges are not are unprecedented. Let's talk about a small community within this large community of mental health challenges, which is the disabled community. India again has world's largest population of disabled people. Uh, and if you just talk about them, then you will find that such people, when there's uh, are will get more neglected in situations like this, and their mental health would be very difficult to understand even by the experts, because that this kind of situation has never occurred before. Health emergencies, education, uh, mental health challenges, income
So,
from any
so
sources. These are
Vijay,
challenges.
sorry to interrupt you, but what
Sure.
I'm understanding here is that one, that the measures that are being currently taken, and secondly, other crises which are emerging from this, like for example, mental health crisis, uh, violence at home, say for example, because men staying at home largely, we have heard that violence at home against women have increased and things like that.
Sure.
And
Sure.
all these you're saying are opportunities for young people to engage with and look for probably doing something, and not just doing something for charity and for social service sake, but actually get to consider that as a alternative career option for themselves and build up something in that. So not only you're doing good, but you're also building up some kind of a career opportunity for yourself. Um, uh, uh, is that what you're saying? One. And secondly, I think we should probably, because I understand that there are many participants in this webinar who are coming from student background. And first, let me ask you, let me confirm this. Is that what you're saying that I just said?
Okay, so let me make. So let's try to. What is entrepreneurship? Let's try to.
I think we'll come to that question later. I'm just clarifying that is that what you meant? That here are, because of this crisis which are emerging, opportunities for young people to engage with and consider that and take that up as building up their career, rather than just doing it for some time, but doing it long term.
Yeah. So yes, and when I'm saying yes, I'm trying to kind of contextualize that why this is a yes, and this is a big yes. So during challenges like such, if I take you back to the US of 1930s, US of 1930s was a very young country. The baby boomers generation, what is called, was coming in US in 1930s. At the same time, in 1929, there was a big stock market crash, the biggest in the history of the world at that particular time, which led to a huge joblessness, destruction of business and opportunities. But what happened after that is a very interesting thing to understand. Besides the World War that we hear, is that there was a whole new generation which started the challenges that came after that was there was shortage of food, there was shortage of labor, there were disease, people were cutting cost. A lot of innovation happened during that time in US. US leadership as we see today is the 1930s, and I believe that that 1930s of US is the 2020s of India, because we are faced with so many challenges. Then it's the time, and we have a huge younger generation with us, a large young population. More than 70% population of India is young. Is that then it opens up an opportunity during the time of crisis like these, because there are so many challenges, somebody needs to solve those challenges.
Okay, so let me go further from there. As I was saying that there's a large number of people, large number of participants in this webinar who are coming from the students background, and many of them may be considering their interest may lie in this whole thing of entrepreneurship and probably social entrepreneurship. But I think at that level, what we have seen in several years of our work is that some fundamental, very basic concerns are there of these young people. And I think some clarity is needed so that we can take this conversation further, that people understand that's where we are coming from and that's what we are talking about. And I think one of the first conclusion which lies is that business, entrepreneurship is business. Business requires money. I don't have money. Where do I go? What do I do? And I think first of all, there is, let's not talk about entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. But I think fundamentally there is also a confusion about business and entrepreneurship. How would you essentially describe the difference, very briefly, of how do you differentiate between a regular business, a commercial business, and a social entrepreneur?
Mhm. Any business, for that matter, the aim of the business to generate access, profit, what we call as profit, access, then the money that you have spent in doing that business, you spend earn more than what the business is, and then you use some of that business profits to for your own expenses plus growth of your work. That's what basic core definition of business is. And entrepreneurship is any person who takes up the challenge of doing it, leading that challenge, is a person who is ready to take up the challenge of creating a business, and uh, through that exploit an opportunity. When I say exploit, it do not necessarily means in a negative sense, but it means that exploit an opportunity where there is a demand of certain things, and you are in a position or in the capacity or in the intent of providing that product or service there. So if we look into this basic definition, then we find that lot of opportunity exists today. And now, obviously, the question comes, if there is an opportunity, where is the money? How do I invest in that? So obviously there's a larger question, and we should discuss about that question later in our talk about what kind of support or where we can get the support to venture out. But if you just look into, let me just give a very simple example for you to understand. Uh, when you are an enterprising person or want to do something, even starting at a small scale could develop into a big scale. Two quick and very simple examples that I want to give: one from Surat and one from Delhi. In Surat, the Surat has one of the largest migrant population in the country because of manufacturing, one of the biggest, largest manufacturing base being there. So obviously the food was not reaching the migrant labor. So there were few people who decided on their own that we'll take it up and provide food to the people. So they started reaching out to the housing complexes of people like us, and said that you have to prepare five chapatis extra. That's it. 5 chapatis extra prepare, and we don't want anything else from you. Just prepare 5 chapatis extra. So the people who started preparing 5 chapatis extra in a, say, apartment complex which has 100 homes, suddenly found that we have 500 chapatis available. And similarly, he now similarly this thing grew. Now they are providing food to over 30,000 migrant workers are getting food every single day through a system wherein we are basically aggregating uh, uh, from different sources and providing a supply chain to deliver it to. So the cost of essentially doing the service, if we think it as a business enterprise, then cost of and we talk about, let's say, a very small cost, we associate probably this is they are doing it free. We talk about, say, adding a 5 rupee packet for food packet, but then you see that you have created from this a business enterprise with low resources with a large scale, large impact. Similarly, in the Gurudwara of Delhi, they decided that they will create langar for similar migrant workers. And currently, they're providing daily food of 150,000 people. Now, this they have been doing for 4 months, where large amount of food material is donations from individuals, which is, but somebody, since somebody took that opportunity that I will do this job, other people came together. Like we have famously said, that universe come together to help you out. And that is what happens when you take that initiative to build something, and then resources and support system start collaborating with you. These are just two examples contextualizing here.
Yeah, I kind of understand, but also kind of not understand. Because I think several of these things remain hazy. You're saying that maybe something started with a good intention and there was no financial benefit that was expected in the beginning. But then to keep it rolling, you have to give it a form of a business, and which means that you have to take cost into consideration. You have to generate some kind of a revenue. You have to put it back into your own growth and scaling up and things like that. So finally, it turns out to be a business. I think students especially would like to hear a very simple answer to this. Where on the other side there are, So what I'm saying is it only the intention by which we do something, and what kind of savings we make, and the proportion of that saving which we make for ourselves. On the other side, I am sort of also compelled to think of examples like communication devices and communication services, which is made communication accessible to every segment of people. We have, say, for example, the nano car, which is made personal mobility accessible to almost everyone, people from the lower segment of the society as well. Isn't that also the intention of a social business? Because finally, it impacts people's life in a positive manner. It raises their standard of living. It also transforms, the way people sort of behave with themselves, and the way they think about themselves, things like that, and quite positively. So if we go back in history, Henry Ford, a horse carriage and going to and thinking of actually making a car which could have been reproduced many times and was affordable, not only for the rich, but also for many, many people. And because of having a personal car, it transformed people's lives in terms of how they were able to live, enjoy, have a family life, and think of themselves and meet other people, become mobile, keep in touch with everyone. So it finally sort of transforms society in a very positive and interesting manner. So I think what we are looking for at this point of time, one, if there could be a simple definition to say that this is social entrepreneurship and this is a social enterprise and this is not. Or is it wise at this point of time that we keep these definitions also not so rigid and keep them open? And we say that we intend to do something good and we also, in the process, want to make some money for ourselves, look after our own needs and requirements, and probably move into a more career kind of a direction. So, what would you really suggest at this point of time when the definitions and the clarity seems to come over each other? I'm not personally very sort of satisfied because every time there's an argument, there seems to be a counter argument. So I would like you to throw some light on this issue. And if you have examples which are very, very clear in terms of distinguishing the two facets of entrepreneurship, it would be good for all of us.
Sure. I think this is there is a perpetual confusion or perpetual uh, uh, kind of ongoing discussion which talks about that what is the difference between what is this what is the idea of this social entrepreneurship, how it does geo Reliance Geo providing cheap data, is that social entrepreneurship? Because cheap data means you can do so much more. It can be used for education, it can be used for communication, so much more you can do. Is that social entrepreneurship? Is having a mobility solution, is that social entrepreneurship? There are many such examples across that uh, we come across. But I think my what I do is that there are several definitions on social entrepreneurship that because it's a very evolving area. But essentially, it comes down to one simple thing: what is the intent of the activity that you're trying to do? What is the intent of that particular activity? It boils down to that only. So, if the intent of the activity is to make money only, and the byproduct of that activity is uh, social impact or any kind of economic impact, then that is one thought process. We are talking about a one thought process. But let's say if the intent of the activity is a little different. Intent of the activity is that I want to have a large impact that will help solve so many problems of the people. Then the purpose of that activity is very different. Let me take one example. Uh, there was this entrepreneur in from US who went to Argentina a few years back, I think 2005, 6 or something. And he saw that in Argentina, the poor people don't have shoes to wear. They didn't have shoes and they can't even afford simple canvas shoes. Then what was so he came back inspired with an idea that I should do something about it. I should think about some solutions that can be developed, and he came up with something called a brand called Tom Shoes. Tom Shoes became a global brand, and it remained one of big success stories where he imagined a model called 1+1. Now, this is very important for you to understand that his intention to create a business was to create opportunity for people who don't have shoes to be able to wear shoes. Shoes was just a metaphor of helping people. Now, how do he helps people? So his model was very simple: that any customer who's buying my shoes will I will be giving one shoe free to communities who can't afford shoes on their own. So he created a model, cross subsidy model, wherein it is a completely profitable business, 100% profitable business, but created a model in which somebody else was buying shoes for somebody else. And it became a $600 million company, supplying shoes to 40 countries across the world. They couldn't innovate further. There were other challenges of markets that happened. But the point I'm trying to answer here is that it created a business model. It doesn't require a separate skill. It created a business model here which utilized the market mechanism which are existing, but the intent was that use the business model to create people. And the similar thing is being done for spectacles by many people. Spectacle, clothes, solar lights. There are n number of examples
Services.
of services, n number of examples that are there across the world where such approach is being used. So it's about, like I said, it is about the intent. What is the intent? Now, in no cases here, the entrepreneur is not having money to run his or her own family. The only thing difference is that he or she is not investing in creating a big antilla in which to live. No, that's not the intent. The intent is to create a business which actually solve certain problem. That is, it's the matter of intent that we're talking
Interesting. So I think it'll be fair probably to talk about also your own example. And you have founded a for-profit company which is
about.
engaged with agriculture. And I think it'll be fair probably to also get into that a little in terms of your own story of what, because I understand that what you just described, you yourself have done something very similar. So I
Sure.
think it'll be good to share that example as well.
Sure, would be happy to. Ekau started with a focused intervention because name itself says that we are focusing on rural markets. We are very clear 100% rural organization, which is focusing. Our grand idea, if you ask me, has always been that we would bring about transformative changes in the rural economy. We want rural economy to be more sustainable. We want services to be available to the rural economy and the rural community so that they have a better life. So the intent here for the students to understand, intent was always very clearly that we want to serve in rural markets. But when we were talking about serving, 18 years back when we started Ekgaon, we were very clear that we will be a for-profit organization. We will provide our services at a cost, and we will recover the cost of providing that services from our market. So we clearly, so the why we are called a social enterprise, which is not what even we were not even aware of the definition when we started the company in 2002, because at that time this definition was not very popular, but the intent was there. So definition came later, intent came first. So intent was to serve a market which is underserved, create a service which is useful, earn from the service, and have an impact. That is what the idea was all about. So what Ekgaon does today is that it works across several states from Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Tamil Nadu, Odisha, and the Northeast, where we work with farmers. We work with farmers across the whole production cycle from growing a crop to selling that crop in the market with an intention that farmer get remunerative prices for the crops that they're selling. They are not selling at loss or they are not selling in distress. And in that process, we are working with the farmers to provide them farm advisory, to provide them access to financial services. We as a company are the first company to provide a loan product. Besides the government, we are the first company to work with financial service provider to create a loan product for crop loan of the farmers, completely digitally delivered. Why digitally? It's not so digital here. The strategy of us working digital is a low cost strategy because digital allow you to have a low cost strategy. So innovation is for an entrepreneur or specifically a social entrepreneurs. You work in such adverse situation that you need to use many resources at your disposal that are available with you to maximize the efficiency of those resources from a point of view of solving a problem to be able to have a greater impact. If I use more money for my own supply chain to work, I will not be able to give money to the farmer. And this is why I need to be efficient first to be able to make a supply chain more efficient. Hence, the return of the farmers should be there. So, Ekgaon today sells over 200 farm products directly procured from the farmers across the country. We are reaching out to around 600 cities across the country on e-commerce. Our work suffered during Corona because of various impact. During this period, we started working with several groups to help them or reorganize the supply chain, which was stuck very badly. And today, just last week, we started deliveries again to our customers and reaching out. And the intention has always been that we will be able to give fair prices to the farmer, and the farmer is able to have a greater, and we are able to have a greater impact on the lives of the farmer.
Very nice, greatly inspiring, Vijay. If I may get a little technical at this point of time, because you mentioned that you started the time and founding this company when social entrepreneurship was not so heard of, and probably the right mechanisms were also not available. So, how do you, in your operations, really ensure, because it's a for-profit company, what you have, so in your operations, in your functions, and how would you ensure that if you are not there, the company still continues to perform and work in a manner which is desired? Why it cannot sort of, divert into the spirit of a for-profit company as we conventionally used to see. And moving on from there, in today's time, in present times, uh, are there any legal exclusive mechanisms which are available for setting up social enterprises? And would you sort of recommend something that if people are wanting to get into an area like this is what they should do? Or you would still say that one should use the existing and the conventional mechanisms like setting up a private limited company for profit, and then keep ensure basically the intent, as you said, in terms of its execution?
I think this is a brilliant question. It is. It gives me also to reflect upon my succession plan within my work. Also, it's a very important thing to understand that what you start with the DNA of your organization, whether that goes forward, sustains over a period of time, or there is a transformation, you move away from the core objective of your enterprise. Uh, so let me kind of try to answer it in two parts. Part one is where we are talking about how to structure your organization in a way that it remains core to the rule that you have created for yourself. So I'll give, instead of giving my own example, I'll give an example of Dr. Varghese Kurian and Amul. Uh, Many people, most of us know what Amul is. Amul is one of the world's largest cooperative, having more than 3 million farmers, supplying milk every day uh, to farmers, to Amul, and that milk is confirmed into milk, cheese, uh, ghee, and ice creams and other stuff, and we consume it as a consumer. Uh, but let me tell you a very interesting fact, which got very visible now when Corona crisis happened, and this is very interesting for the students to understand that how do you sustain the core DNA of your organization, uh, and your impact also continues. So when Corona happened, you might have heard in news and other places that every single food commodity, let's say chicken, let's say poultry, eggs, let's say meat, let's say fish, let's say any food item, vegetables or or any other commodities across the country, the prices for the farmer, the producer of that crop, fell drastically. Of course, customer had to pay more because there was a short supply, but every single commodity that we consume in terms of food, the net price fall for the farmers, the producers across the board, across the country. There was only one supply chain, which is dairy supply chain, in which price for the producer never fell. Now, anybody will ask why. And that is where lies the question of the institutional DNA or the objective or the purpose for which the business is meant. Now, India has a unique thing. It has cooperative, what we call as dairy cooperatives. Plus, it has private dairies also. Several private dairies operate. But if you study what happened during this crisis, that private dairies almost closed down their operation. They stopped collecting milk from the farmers, whereas cooperative dairies, which are run by cooperative, and I mind you, I'm clarifying, these are not cooperative of the government. These are the cooperatives run by farmers, largely with professionals on the board. They decided that we will continue to purchase from the farmers at the same rate, and plus we will add more farmers to purchase. The total purchase was increased 30% more to include more farmers so that the milk that the farmers who were supplying to a private dairy is not thrown. Punjab, for example, has more than 80 private dairies, and all of them ceased operation. Only
Why?
cooperative dairies were working.
Why?
They stopped operation because the cost of operation or cost of delivery of the operation or cost of doing the business was very prohibitive. They believed, and this is like private profit. I, as a owner of a dairy, I want to secure my private profit. That why do I need to uh, why do I need to spend more money right now in this particular activity, because I have to invest more money to deliver. I have to keep safeguard. I need to do social distancing. I need to retain labor. So private operations completely stopped, and that has been observed across the country. It's the only the cooperative dairy, which cooperative dairies are owned by the farmers. They ran and they provided stable prices to the farmer. Now that is because the institution, Varghese Kurian has gone. He's no more there. He died. But the institution has retained the core values for which it was made, and the core value was that we will support our small farmers. And that is the core value that is part. If you embed that in the institutional DNA, create a professional team which runs that organization. So that challenges at me also, that I need to create a professional team to run my own organization and ensure the sustainability of the core principle on which the organization goes. It doesn't matter whether the organization is a cooperative. It does matter who's the owner of the organization. Ownership does matter. If the ownership is with a community which understands that this is the time for us. So like we were discussing earlier, why the civil society? Why people on there are people on the road helping people who are walking to give them food, to give them milk. They themselves don't have food and milk enough or water enough, but they are standing on the road to help others. That is the power of the community when it comes together. The collaboration of the collective is what works. Individual profit is the one which never sustains itself. In the crisis, it withdraws.
Very interesting, Vijay. I thought that we can extend this conversation a little into also, since you said that these are the times when there are also opportunities of doing something and people wish, especially the young people who are wanting to enter into a professional life, there is an opportunity and a very relevant opportunity to do something ahead. And also taking your own example, one would be interested to know that what are the typical challenges which one has to bear in mind and what can one do about it. So one wants to set up something in a very simple way. If one can sort of describe this process that 1, 2, 3, this is what you do and this is where the help may be available. It'll be really useful for, I think, young people.
So the question is whether where is the help available?
No, first of all, what are the challenges? What should I be prepared to face? These are the things which I have to keep in mind. And then once I know that these are the challenges which I have to address, where could help be possibly coming from?
Okay.
And what kind of help?
I think the core of every business, and so we need to do a little more diagnosis of entrepreneurship in the sense that what is that you want to do. So everything in a business depend upon supply and demand. That's the very simple thing. There's a supply and there's a demand, and there's a supply which comes to meet the demand. That's a core principle of every business. And so much is also about social entrepreneurship. The same principle applies for social entrepreneurship. So if there is a demand, let's say post-corona time, we were talking about education, we're talking about health, we're talking about so many things. Is there a demand? There is a demand. There's a huge demand which has come up across the country to innovate models of low-cost services, of health, education, everything at a very low cost. There's a huge demand. The demand is there. Now, where to create a supply from? And that's where you have to start thinking on the line. So, for example, let's say education. I'm using education as an example for us to start understanding where to get the support and supplies from. So if there's an entrepreneur who's looking that I would work on education and online education and trying to make it available to the 94% people who don't have online education, then I can work on many things. I can be a platform provider. Platform provider is that I have a server, I have a software in which anybody can upload their courses and start giving those courses to millions of people who don't have. The only thing is that these people need to have internet access, right? Let's say internet access is not available. They are too poor to afford internet access, but they have television with them. So can you then think about, then what you need to do is that you need to partner with people who run television channels, right? So let's say somebody says that I will go to, say, Tata Sky and tell them that I want to provide free education thing or low cost education thing, and my platform is available. Can we do a partnership and work with you? Tata Sky says that I think this is a good idea. So many people are at their home. Maybe I will put ads below and I will earn some money for myself and I will run your program for free. Now there was a problem. I am trying to meet a problem with a solution, and then I'm trying to do a partnership to make my solution reach to the people which I am intending to, and then everything is aligned on a financial bit. What is the finance? How will you sustain that enterprise? Who pays ultimately? So in this particular example, we have seen that we need to, so if a quality entrepreneur, we try to understand what is the quality of the entrepreneur or the skills that the entrepreneur is requiring, then entrepreneur is to understand the whole connection from the from what is the innovation they are trying, what is the innovation that they have created, and how that innovation is going to meet the demand that they are intending to take to. So the whole cycle. So I need partnership support. I need money for content development. I need people skill to content development. So for example, I'm forgetting the name. There's this Harvard guy who offer free classes. What is his name? Kabir classes? No, no. I'm forgetting right now. So this guy started offering education online, and education online. His intent was he was making courses for his own family members. So he said, "Let me put it on online," and it became a global movement. Now companies are founded on the principle that if let's open up our courses and curriculum and make it available across. and digital distribution strategies are being designed to distribute the content which is already available. Free of cost content is available to reach out to a large community of people. So we need to have these. We need to have a thinking mind who understands the problem very clear and design a solution which is very clear. I understand 100% that it is not necessarily that you yourself are an expert in one or other thing. Not necessarily. I am not an agriculturist by education, but I work in agriculture. For me to work in agriculture, I need to study and learn agriculture, or I need to work with experts who are from agriculture. That is how you build your knowledge base or skill base. So that is one of the biggest skill of an entrepreneur is to have an open listening mind to learn more from whomsoever they can approach. So reaching out is probably one of the most important skill of an entrepreneur. Other things start coming a little later.
Okay, good. So, no, the other question, other part of the question was also that what kind of support and facilities in terms of infrastructure, funding, etc., is also available at these points of time. And what would you also consider most important? I mean, uh, would you consider, say, for example, finding a good mentor most important thing in this process? Who can guide you through this entire process because it cannot be linear and it cannot be very, very uh, 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 certain in terms of how it goes. So I think you need to consult and you need to sort of be guided uh, uh, by someone who is wiser and more experienced in terms of what actions you should be taking at each juncture and each venture. But as such, you think, like, say, I can mention, of course, the Incubation Center at the University Delhi, where we provide similar kind of support in terms of mentorship, money, some kind of infrastructure and things like that. But for young people, what else is available, which is practically useful? You have anything on that?
Sure. See, I always say and always believe that one of the most important things that one should have, uh, besides every confidence and beside everything, uh, is the intent. Niyat, we call it in Hindi and Urdu. Niyat, the intent is very important. If the intent is there, other things you will aspire to do. You can reach out and do. Other things will fall in place. But if the intent itself is not rightly placed, then no amount of mentoring or an incubation support or financial support can make you follow through on your idea, because it's your idea and you're the one who have to take it through. So the most important content is intent. More than confidence, more than knowledge, more than education, it is intent which is more important. After that, I think what is more important is to understand what you want to do. You need to have more clarity on what you want to do, and you need to study that aspect more. Sometimes there are social challenges one doesn't understand. Say, for example, somebody wants to work on mental health, but he or she himself themselves are not equipped on the intricacies of medical health problem. But you are very clear that you want to work on medical health, and you are doing you want to work on in this particular area, so your intent is clear. Then you will reach out to the people and do partnership with them, that this is what I want to do. Are you in a buy-in for that? Maybe those people are not equipped. They are technical experts. They are good in expertise, but they are not good in mentoring you. So you reach out to mentors and institutions like AICEE, incubators, and there are several incubators that are available now, have the ability to offer that support for an entrepreneur to build their ideas further. And that is more important, because once you have your understanding, some ideas are, many people can have idea. Hundreds and thousands of ideas are there, but execution of those ideas is the weakest link. Execution of those ideas is the is the place where most people fail, and they fail because they don't get right kind of mentoring support to follow through on those ideas. And that is where the role of mentor comes in. The mentor is able to help and guide them to understand their idea and the strength and weaknesses of their idea impartially, to understand the success of the idea, because is invested in the success of your idea. Mentor is not invested in the success of you. That is up to you. So mentor is invested in the success, is only the whether the idea has a merit enough to succeed. But if the idea itself doesn't, then there's a problem. So other skills, say financial skills, understanding financial skill, raising funds, co-working space where I can sit and work. Uh, all these things are, there's a growing ecosystem right now across the country, which is available for entrepreneurs to explore their ideas, and there's a fair amount of funds which are available as well for the same. We ourselves have set up an incubator for agriculture sector, specifically in the Northeast region, where the idea is to build new age agriculture entrepreneur, because that is an area where entrepreneur is probably one of the weakest.
Wonderful, Vijay. I think it's been great listening to you. And before we get on to, I think, the question answers session from the participants, I have two things in my mind. One, it'll be good to hear some kind of inspiring story, which is global, and where, in terms of social entrepreneurship or this kind of an entrepreneurship, has been able to influence a very fundamental transformation in people's life. And also clubbed with the question probably is that this path, why is it so significant for India in the current times today? Is it, first of all, and if it is, why is it so significant?
Uh, so, um, so while we have a lot of global stories, and I'll like to I can tell about those global stories. There are many books available about those stories, but one of my favorite story is always about from India itself, and that is the story, and the beautiful and a very powerful story of Amul, which is unfortunately not much discussed in our academic discourse or even in our corporate success stories. And I feel sad about it because it's one of the biggest success stories. Let me give some numbers for you to understand how big a success is. India, uh, India is the second largest producer of food in the world. We are the second largest market of food in the world. But if you look into 1,000 companies across the globe in food, there's only one company from India which is there, which is Amul. Now, this is very strange. If private entrepreneurship is such a great achievement, that's what all of us celebrate. We celebrate Reliance, we celebrate Tata's, we celebrate so many other institutions. But if private entrepreneurship, I'm using that private word here deliberately, is so successful, why do you think we don't have entrepreneurs in the food industry? We have the largest market, we have the largest produce, and we still don't have one of the largest companies in the world. The only company which is there is Amul. It's a $4 billion company. Now, the story is not just that. This is just a global market, irrespective of the social role Amul plays. Is that Amul has given sustained income for last 50 years to 3 million farmers, 3 million farmers across Gujarat and other states for 30 years, sustainable income. And we are talking about small farmers. We are talking about very, very small farmers where selling milk to Amul form 25 to 30% of their income. That income is then used by these same farmers to invest in the business to get a better education, better health, better sanitation, pakka houses. So one of the impact studies which have been done shows that most of the Amul farmers who have been associated with Amul have pakka houses, All of their children are educated above 12th class. Many of them are graduates and postgraduate and are now working within Amul and are working for various corporate groups across the country. And they have migrated to different countries across the world. So if you just look at the impact itself of Amul as a social enterprise, then it is massive. And is it benefiting other people? Yes, it is. Me, you, everybody else in the country benefits from Amul every single day. Let's talk about a social impact in a milk deficient country. India, when it got independent in 1947, was a milk deficient country. We imported milk from Australia, from New Zealand, from US. We were importing milk powder and then making it as milk and selling it in bottles. Today, India is largest producer of milk in the world. This is another aspect that we just overlooked, that we have has a massive social enterprise in India itself, and there's no bigger example of this than this of a social enterprise across the world. So if we need to look into whether there is a great achievement, then we have a great achievement right here to look at. So my I can give you many more examples which are there, and in new age also, in health, education, many expertise, many people have innovated very beautiful models. But I wanted to give this example for you to give that Amul has been working in a commercial sector, which is just a commercial sector, and still has been able to create a great social enterprise, social enterprise, and a great social impact.
Very nice. Thank you so much, Vijay. Let's take up some questions. Rahul, can I request you to please
Sure.
read them out?
Sure. There are few questions which have come up, and since there are not many of them, I would request the people who have posted these questions to ask it themselves. They can make it very short and crisp, so that not much of time is consumed. So I would request Divakar Singh. I think he is from AUD. He has a couple of questions around ethical issues and innovation. Divakar, if you can hear us, you can. I have okay. You have unmuted your mic. You can ask your question, please.
Sir, good afternoon. Divakar Singh from Ambedkar University.
Hi, Divakar.
Can you?
Yeah, Divakar, go ahead.
Sir, social enterprises by default are considered ethical because of their social intent. But due to sustainability issue, they need to have some kind of economic activities in their mind. So how do they maintain their ethical issues? Do they face ethical issues, and how they actually fight those ethical issues? This is the first question. And the next question is regarding frugal innovation, sir. That is ground root innovations. So what is the scope of ground root innovations in social enterprises? And the third question is regarding a common platform or web portal where we can get information about social enterprises. Like you already said about the definitional issues, there is a lot of problem. We don't have clear-cut definition, and the legal means social enterprises are legally not defined in our country. So is there any platform where we can find a lot of information about social enterprises? We know a lot of success stories, but the failure of social enterprises are rarely reported. So can we have some knowledge about those failure also? Is there any platform for that? Thank you, sir.
All good questions, Divakar. Let me start with the first about ethics. So for me to explain ethics, it's a very, like I said, it is a very social enterprise or entrepreneurship is a very personal issue. Let me give a conventional understanding of ethics. Right now, when Corona is happening, several companies have fired their employees. Many people have fired their maids, or people who wash their cars, or many other people fired their staff so that they don't want to give salaries to them. many corporates have reduced the salaries of their staff. Reliance Group has said that we will cut 50% salary of all our staff, right? Then there were two companies who came out and said that we will not cut salary. This is Rajiv Bajaj of the Bajaj Group, that we will not cut salaries for even closed lockdown period. We will pay salaries to our staff. And then Ajim Premji of the Wipro Group said that we will not cut salaries, we will not cut salaries, plus we will not fire people, and we will continue to provide. And Ajim Premji went further and opposed Government of India's steps to curtail labor laws, that this is unethical. His question was, this measure is unethical. Now, why I have given you this? I have given you this as an example of corporate, mainstream corporate. I'm not even talking about social enterprise. Now, so ethics in general are very personal. You can transform those ethics to your company's ethics. Being the leader in that particular position, it is up to you as a leader to pass on those ethics to the organization. If you decide that my organization will not cut salary, the organization decides that, right? They are personal ethics of the leader, which has been transformed into the organizational ethics, and that social enterprises are no different than that. Will many people think that if I'm running a non-profit, that itself defines that I'm, like I think you mentioned that also, that since I'm running a social enterprise or a non-profit, I'm ethical. Definitely not. That is not. So let me give an example of that. The Board of Cricket Control of India, BCCI, is one of the largest, richest and largest body of cricket in the world, sporting body in the world. Do you know that it is registered as a trust in Tamil Nadu? It's an NGO. BCCI, one of the most profitable cricket organization in the world, is an NGO registered as a trust in Tamil Nadu, right? National Geographic, which is another organization, one of the world's largest organization. It's a big print organization, and some of the beautiful imaginary we see about our wildlife and nature comes through funding of the National Geographic, is also a non-profit. So being a for-profit, non-profit doesn't make the difference, or it's again comes to the leadership and the personal ethics. And as Sharik was talking earlier, is whether those ethics are maintained in your institutional DNA. It comes to that, completely comes to that. And you need to build leadership within your organization as in succession, whether they will be able to take on the same ethical values that we have. That same thing applies in every single form of institution, private, social enterprise, NGO, even in government. Ethical leadership is also comes from there. Your second question was on where do we get resources, learnings, specifically failures in social enterprise. I admit that documentation of such resources is very poor. Largely, people record only success. Recently, there was a book which came on agriculture called Farming Futures, in which a Gaon case study along with 15 other case study was documented. And I insisted to the writers that while you are documenting my success in the case study, because that's what the authors wanted to, please include my failures also in the case study. And they did. They included the failures also. It is important to share success and failures both, but unfortunately, the kind of society we have built, we only treasure success, we don't treasure failure, and which is a fault, which I agree with you that that's a fault, an unfortunate reality, and we don't document it. We should document it, make it available, very less available right now. Again, there's no single source of social enterprise information. Like I said, it's a very evolving field. There are organizations who work on social enterprise, and one of them is Ashoka. Ashoka is the global network of social entrepreneurs, and they have almost 3,500 social entrepreneurs across the world. India has the second largest social entrepreneurs in the world now, and under Ashoka. their case studies is there on Ashoka website that you can check. Is they are available for you to see, and you can check there. That is one source which is there. And there are certain books on social entrepreneurship written. Dr. Madhukar Shukla has written one of the first books in India on social entrepreneurship. You should try to get that book. A few other books have also been written on social entrepreneurship. I will share those list with the incubator, Ambedkar University incubator, for you to reach out to that. And I'll request them to make it also available on their website. Is there any other question left? I'm sorry if I missed something.
Sir, one question was regarding frugal innovation and importance of frugal innovation or grassroots innovation
Understood.
to social.
Understood. That's a very interesting and important topic. And interesting because I have worked on frugal innovation myself at the start of my career. I don't have much against frugal innovation, but I also want to be very cautious when we talk about frugal innovation. Uh, uh, so we do innovate. Uh, we do try to find a solution around a problem that is there, and there's no solution available. Then we innovate and come up with a solution. But uh, it's not the cost effectiveness, or it's not about the cost of the solution. It is about the cost effectiveness of the solution or the principle on which that innovation is done. That is important for you to understand. Let's say one very simple thing. We sanitizer is going to be a required commodity in foreseeable future now, and many people have invested. So Dabur Group in just 2 months have sold 50 crore worth of sanitizer just in 2 months, and that's a huge revenue if you just look into that. Just understand that, can we have and there are many innovations across the country. If you just read how people are preparing sanitizer, there are many people who have prepared sanitizers across the country. Face mask they have prepared. So frugality in the innovation itself is one aspect of it, but how you will be building it as a enterprise is something which you need to understand. Not all frugal innovation can be scaled. This is a very important thing that you to understand. Not all frugal innovation can scale, and this is largely where, because we end up celebrating that small innovation or big innovation, frugal big innovation, but we don't understand the business principle of scaling that innovation or reaching out to a larger group, which is something which also we need to learn and understand. Frugality is a desired outcome. Like I said that best you should try minimizing the cost of what you want to provide, and we are talking about the age dawn of low cost innovation in the country, because we will have 50 crore people who will go below poverty line in just 1 month's time, and they will not be able to afford expensive stuff, education included. So frugality is to be understood there, but as a principle, not as a as a product innovation.
Very much, sir. Thanks.
Amrita had also asked a similar question. I think, Amrita, does that answer your question regarding sources available for learning about social entrepreneurship and innovation? If you have anything else you would like to ask. Okay, fine. So we have one more question from Meghna, who is an incubator at ACIE. How can we make skill development tech enabled at the same time cost effective, considering that a lot of students coming from economically weaker sections lack access to technology? Also, feasibility of the same, since the personal mentor-mentee connect is lost via recorded lessons.
Uh, Fantastic question, and a very relevant. I think Meghna has answered part question herself. Uh, is that when we talk about digital learning, it's not a very easy concept. as such, because the personal connect is lost, and people from socially weaker sections or economically weaker sections also find a huge problem in this, because uh, their circumstances do not provide them that much space. So they live in very small houses. I'm not even talking about digital connectivity here, or the type of digital connectivity here, or the interface which they access the digital connectivity. So if you just look into that, then there's a huge challenge which is there. Uh, so innovation. The point is that you need to innovate uh, as a trainer. You need to innovate on methodologies in which you need to make your digital learning more interactive, in such a way that that interactivity allows people to be more connected to the ecosystem and feel that connection. So there's need to be a lot of back and forth digitally, of course, because of the distancing issues, uh, health and distancing issues. That innovation needs to come from your side on how you are able to make it more interactive, because you are talking about a more disadvantaged group whose basic skill on that interface are also limited. But please try to also understand that there's also an opportunity that people who don't speak usually in a working group class situation sometimes feel more empowered when they are behind a digital screen. So think it of that as an opportunity, that they are behind a digital screen. So their innovation or being in a group, and that one-to-one connect, even though it is missing, sometimes also is very useful.
I hope, Meghna, that answers your question. If you have anything else, obviously you can connect with us, through phone or writing an email. There's one more question from Urban Carry. I think Nishant would have posted this. Given the current situation about COVID-19, what impact could it bring on fundings available for startups? If you can throw some light, if you have some ideas around that.
Um,
Hi, I'm
Yeah, Nishant,
yeah.
would you like to answer this question? This?
in. Yeah. I
Okay.
want to
Okay.
twist
Okay.
the
Go ahead.
question a little.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep. So intention is one part, as Vijay shared, कि ठीक है, intention अच्छा है, ethics भी ठीक है, लेकिन मेरा confusion ये है कि इस situation के बाद बचेगा कौन? मतलब अभी मैं देख रहा हूँ कि काफी सारे startups के हम situations देख रहे हैं कि business are shutting down in these scenario, क्योंकि पैसा नहीं है चलाने को, काफी चीजें हो रही हैं. So the question is कि is there a cash crunch in economy or the funding crunch in the economy right now? और अगर ऐसा है तो उसका funding पे क्या impact आने वाला है? Both in terms of the amount of the funding and also in terms of the area of funding. तो किस तरह की organization को ज़्यादा fund किया जाएगा आगे जाके? So this question is to both to Vijay as an entrepreneur himself, and also to Sharik sir as a center, as an incubation center. So I want to listen on this.
Good question, Nishant. I think the funding scene is evolving. We don't know an answer to that, because there are a lot of things which are happening, which are not probably in the correct direction, because government is acting also as a major attractor of that funding. So a lot of CSR fund that was usually available for other activities, social activities, Government of India has just taken it over in the PM Care Fund, which has become almost a 25,000 crore or 30,000 crore fund right now. So unfortunately, there is a huge funding crunch in the social sector, because most of the fund which was supposed to be available for the social sector, for the social entrepreneurship sector, has gone to government, which is not good at all. I must add that, because government is a very poor spender of money. It is not a good spender of money, and I don't know whether it will actually spend on funding social entrepreneurship, all there. I think another point which also I'd like to add is that yes, startup ecosystem is going through a major crisis right now. If you hear across the country, you will find closure of startups uh, in a massive way. But I would, Nishant, my talk to you on that would be that you also need to understand what are those startups who are closing down. Those were the startups who were on a very weak business model. Most of those were internet startups working only on internet. Their existence was only on internet. They were not on ground. If you just look into the revenue losses which has happened to the big celebrated companies like Uber, Ola, Oyo, just the three companies, then look into Swiggy, Zomato, all of these companies have completely crashed. Completely. There's no business model left for them at all. Completely crashed. Zomato and Swiggy, who deliver food, won't even have a business model going forward for 6 to 1 year. There won't be any business model existing at all because uh, people will not order online because they're very afraid of the hygiene of the food that is going to come. So if you look into just this bit, then you'll find that social entrepreneurs who cater to a social need, because the need, and in our scenario, the node is actually bombarding. It is increasing like many things. Will be in a better shape than the normal internet entrepreneurs who are just creating more valuation, and largely none of them is profitable. None of them was profitable earlier also, and now the operations have shown, because their operation shut down, have clearly shown, and they have fired almost 60 to 70% of their staff, clearly shown that it was a mirage for most of them. I'm not saying they'll not come back. They'll come back because there's a necessity of many of them, but many of them will shut down. So if you ask me whether the funding will be available, the scenario is, as of now, is not clear. I would like to admit that. But going forward, I do believe that people need of social entrepreneurship will be identified much more, because the social and demand itself is very high. Demand is going to be very high for next 3 to 4 years. That is why I'm calling it a dawn of the age of social enterprise across the world, not just India, because same impact is there across the world. And the normal business enterprise which are there, not even in India, across the world, have not been able to answer to this crisis which is right now there. So the obvious thing is that you have to embed your business more socially with your community, and hence you will be more sustainable because that community will be dependent upon you, and they will be ready to pay for your services. And I presume with this understanding, the funders will come and will provide the financial resources which are available. You have to wait and watch for next few months to understand whether the social entrepreneurship will get more funds or not.
Yeah, I only want to add in this, Vijay and Nishant, that this is absolutely right. But so far, I think what we were doing to a certain extent was waiting and watching. That if some announcement will come our way, which we'll be able to grab. But I think right now the situation is that we have to keep our mandates ready. We have to have our proposals ready, and we have to be very, very sort of actively working on that. Because I think what I hear from at least the intention of the government is that there is uh, there is a desire to encourage entrepreneurship as such, and they're looking for the right kind of proposal. So I think from our end, we have to be ready with the right proposals and say that this is what and how this money is required. So I think also the onus is on our side, where we keep ourselves working and not become passive, and keep good proposals ready, both in terms of deliberation and also in terms of clarity of roadmap and execution.
Uh, we can take one more question. There is none on the chat right now. If anybody has one last question, we can take just a quick one. Okay. Okay. In that case, I think doubts are clear, and
There
we're
was
happy.
there was one question from Amrita. Does AGAO supports entrepreneurs who want to work in agriculture?
Okay, that was directed to you, I guess, directly.
Yes, it
Okay.
seems it was there in the chat.
Okay.
So I can quickly answer that. Yes, AGAO does support entrepreneurs in agriculture. I think that will be also, if AIC relevant, if it is also a mandate of AIC, and you can actually present your case to AIC also. where I'll be helping. I can help you there as well. Our mentorship, eGown's direct involvement in agri entrepreneurship as of now is for the Northeast, and we have an incubator there. You can apply to the incubator if you are interested in that. You can apply to the incubator in the Northeast if you want to work there.
I think that's all. We have no further questions lined up. So
I think it has been a great session. Thank you everybody for joining,
yeah,
and I hope that this has been useful. I think what we can do is leave our links, and if any with us later for anything, most welcome.
absolutely. So we have I've shared your our contacts and email IDs as well on your emails. If you have any queries, concerns, anything, any information which you would like to know about, ACI or anything related to social entrepreneurship, you can write to us. We can direct to the right person and get those queries answered for you. And we would like to thank Vijay. Thanks for your time. And really,
Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate your knowledge which you have shared on this platform right now. And thanks, Shadikshar, for your time and asking some genuine and relevant questions in the current scenario. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for
Thank you.
joining. Have a great day. Looking forward for the other sessions.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.